All right, guys, so now we're going to get into the Canvas API, which is used to draw graphics on the fly via JavaScript. And it's part of the HTML5 specification, and it's supported in all modern browsers. Now, the Canvas API is useful for a variety of applications and uses. It's used a lot for games and animation, things like data visualization and photo manipulation. And the Canvas API is based on a 2D rendering context, and this context is created by the canvas element. So we actually have an HTML tag called canvas, which you can set a width and a height to as well. So let's create a simple example. In our HTML, I'm gonna go, let's see, we'll just go right under the H1 here, and let's create a canvas element. And nothing's going to go inside of it, but we're going to add a couple attributes. So I'm going to add an ID of my-canvas, and let's also give it a width. We'll say, you can make this whatever you want, but I'm going to do 600 by 600. And then I'm also going to give it a border. So in the head, we'll just go right here and add some style tags and just say for the canvas, I'm going to add a border of 1 pixel solid black, just so you can see where it begins and ends. Okay, so let me just minimize this, and we should see on our screen, we should see something like this. All right, now let's jump into the JavaScript, and what we need to do first is, of course, bring the element in, and then we're going to create a context for our canvas to work with. So let's say const canvas, and we'll set that to document.getElementById, and it has an ID of my-canvas. Okay, and then we want to create our context, and we use that context object to do pretty much everything, to draw, to fill in colors, to fill in stroke colors, whatever it might be. So a common convention is to call it CTX, but you can call it whatever you want. And then on that canvas element, there's a getContext method, and that's what we want to call. And we're going to pass in here a string of 2D. Okay, so now we have a 2D context to work with. So we'll start off by just drawing a simple rectangle. So we'll say CTX, and then on that, we're going to set a fill style. And I'm going to just set that to a color of green. And you can use hexadecimal or RGB or whatever if you want. And now fill style is if you want to fill something in. Okay, there's also stroke style, which is more like the color of the line or the border. But I'm setting the fill style to green. And if I save, nothing's going to happen yet because I haven't drawn anything on the screen. But let's now say CTX, and we're going to use the fill rect. We're going to use the fill rect method, and that's going to take in a few things. So first off, we want the X and Y position. This is the X, the horizontal axis, and then this is the Y. So I'm going to say I want it 10 pixels out on the X and 10 pixels out on the Y. So we'll say 10 and 10. And then the next two are going to be the width and the height of the rectangle. So I'll do 150 and 100. So if I save that, now you see I have a 150 by 100 green rectangle that's 10 pixels away from the x-axis start and the y-axis start. Now, of course, this isn't very impressive, but it's just to kind of give you an idea of how this works. We're actually going to create a little project that is going to be an animated ticking clock using Canvas, along with something called request animation frame, which we're going to look at in the next video. But let's draw some more shapes here. I'm just going to put a comment here. We'll say draw rectangle, and then let's do a circle. So we'll say draw circle. Now to draw circles, we use the arc method. So I'm going to say ctx.arc, and this takes in quite a few things. So the first two arguments are going to be where we want to put this, the X and Y, just like with fill rect. So I'm going to put it in the middle. So I'll do 300 from the X and 300 from the Y. Then we want the radius, which I'll do 100. So that's the size of the circle. Then we want the start angle, which will be 0. And then the end angle is going to be pi. So math.pi, which is the math object, and then the pi property will give us pi, and we want to multiply that by 2, because what we're doing here is using radians, and 1 complete revolution around a circle is equal to 2 times pi radians. So that should give us, this should give us a full circle with 100 radius. And then we want to set the fill. Actually, let me show you what happens if we don't use the fill style, if we don't set a fill style. So if we just say fill, it's going to use the last fill style, which is green. So let's say I want to make this red. What I would do is then put the fill style, say ctx.fillStyle equals red, and then anything that comes after that is going to have a fill style of red until you change it. You can, and we're actually going to look at this later, but you can save the context, whatever context you're in, meaning the fill style, stroke style, etc., and then you can restore it at a later point. And that is used a lot in animation, and we're going to use that in our clock later. All right, and we could put fill style like right here if we wanted to. That would work as well, but I usually like to put it before. So next thing we're going to look at is drawing lines. So with lines, we need to begin at somewhere. So we're going to use the begin path method. So let's say ctx begin path. And then I want to move to a specific area, because basically we're starting here at 0, 0. And I don't want to start the line here. I want to move to a certain area. So I'm going to use the move to method. So ctx dot move to. And let's move to, we'll just go to 10, 10, where we started our rectangle. And then I want to draw a line to 300, 300, which is where our circle is. So then we would say ctx.line2. So move to won't draw anything. Line 2 will draw a line. So let's say to 300, 300, and that's the x and y values. Okay, now it's not drawing anything just yet because a line doesn't use a fill style, it uses a stroke style. So let's actually put that right here. We'll say ctx.stroke style, and we'll set that to orange. Okay, and then we need to actually call stroke, which basically draws it on the page. So we'll say ctx stroke, and there we go. So what we did here is we moved to 1010, which is right here. We drew a line, or we set the style to orange, then we drew a line to 300, 300. And we set, and then we just called stroke, which finally draws it on the page. Now, if I wanted a thicker line than that, what I could do is use line width. So we could say ctx.line width, and I'll set that to 5. And now you can see we have a thicker line. Okay, so that's lines. Now let's talk about drawing text. So, because we can draw text as well using we can use fill text and stroke text. So I'm actually going to set the font here. So we can say ctx font, and we can put the size and the style of font. So we'll say 30 pixels Arial. Okay, and then we can change the fill style. So we'll say ctx.fill style, and we'll set that to blue. And then let's do ctx dot, and we're going to use fill text. And this method takes in, first of all, what we want to type, so the string. So we'll say hello world, and then the x and y values. So let's say we want to go down 100 and over 100, and then the max width of the text, which we'll do 300. So if I save that, now you can see we have hello world. Let's actually go a little bit more over on the x-axis. Okay, now we also have a stroke text, which we can use, which will be kind of like an outline. So if we do stroke text, and let's see, let's move it down a little. So we'll say 400 on the y-axis. Now, the reason it looks like that, let's actually move it down a little more just to get it off the circle. But the reason it looks like that is because it's using the last line width, which is 5. So what we could do is set ctx.line width, And let's set that to 2 and see what that looks like. Okay, so you can see it's kind of like a border, it's a stroke. Let's do 1 actually. And the fill style doesn't apply to this because it's stroke. So if we want to change that color to blue, we would use a stroke style. So say stroke style blue, and there we go. Now we can also pull in images into our canvas as well. So in the sample files for this in the sandbox, I have this ball image, soccer ball image. So I'm going to add that to the HTML. So right under canvas, we'll say image, and what is it, ball.png, and let's just add a width. I'll say width equals, we'll do 100, and height equals 100. Okay, so now it's just on the page, right? It's not in the canvas, but what I want to do is bring that into the canvas. So let's say draw image, and we want to bring it in, so we'll say const, we'll call it image, and document dot query selector, and we'll just select the IMG. And then I don't want it to show just on the page, I just want to move it to the canvas. So what I can do is set the style of display. We can set that to none, and if I do that, it won't show on the page, right? Now with images, since we're using an external resource, the image, then we want to actually wait until it loads until we put it on, or else we might run into some issues. So what I'll do is, on image, let's add an event listener, and we want to listen for the load event. So as soon as the image loads, then we'll go ahead and run a function, and then I just want to do ctx dot, and then there's a method called draw image, and it's going to take in the image. It's going to take in where we want to put it. Let's say 270, and then for the width and the height, I mean, we have that set in the HTML, but we set it here as well. And there we go. Okay, if I wanted to try to get it more in the middle, so let's do like 250. Yeah, there we go. So that's how we can draw an image on the page. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, this isn't really, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to create this right here. And that's true, but you can use Canvas for some really powerful stuff. And this is just to get you familiar with some of these methods and some of these properties. So fill style, stroke style, etc. Now, the Canvas is very useful for animation. So in the next video, we're going to look at something called request animation frame, which allows us to basically do just that, request a frame of animation, and we can keep calling that, and we can do different things in each frame, or each step, I should say, and we can animate stuff. So once we look at that, we can start on our project, which is going to be an animated ticking clock, which will show the actual time. And then we're even going to go even further into that. We're going to have a form where we can style the colors of the hands, the frame, the clock face, and so on. All right, so we'll get to that next.